It over to Scott Pippin, another University of Georgia, brave souls coming over somewhat into enemy territory, it seems like, to talk about the Defense Community Resilience Program. So thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Dana, and I just want to say thank you for inviting me here, and thank you to all the organizers of this great event today. I've learned a tremendous amount of all the great things that are going on in this region and across South Carolina, and I'm honored to be part of it. So again, I'm Scott Pippin. I manage the University of Georgia's Defense Community Resilience Program. I'm a member of the public service faculty at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. As our friends from Clemson were talking about earlier, UGA is our land-grant university in Georgia, so that means in addition to education and research, we have a specific public service and outreach goal, and this is part of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the program and just in general and what we kind of do, and then get into some of the specific projects we're doing. The intent here, I think, is to explore like if there are opportunities for us to be more engaged here. We're not looking, as I said, there's like a ton of stuff going on, and we're not looking to supplant or compete with any of the great things, but our program is specifically meant to be dynamic and flexible and try to be that gap filling and capacity building organization, both from our internal work at the Institute of Government, but then also through our reach back to the College of Engineering at UGA, all the resources at UGA through a network of other university partners, private sector partners. So how can we just be extra hands and feet for installations and defense communities to do the work that we're doing here, and just where are those gaps that we can fill and just be helpful in this process. So the official description of the Defense Community Resilience Program, or DCRP, as I'll probably start calling it now, is that we're a multidisciplinary organization housed at the Institute of Government. Again, it's university-wide. We're just housed and managed in the Institute of Government, which is one of our PSO units, as I said. And support the shared resilience planning between installations and defense communities, so both on-base projects, off-base projects, and then most importantly, projects that span that fence line, and how it can be the collaborator, the coordinator to address some of the logistical issues that come with doing that kind of work. A word about the Institute of Government. We're the largest institute of government, institute of its type in the country. I think that might go back and forth with UNC and some folks in Texas, depending on how many people we have employed on a particular day, but we're close to 200 faculty and staff, mostly housed in Athens, but scattered across the state and then a handful outside the state. We've been doing this work for close to 100 years. We've been working with all levels of government, from federal, state, but primarily local in Georgia. We do all of the training for all local officials, from newly elected city council and county commissioners to court clerks and zoning officials, and as well as the state legislators and everybody else. So we have this really intense governmental focus in trying to just make government better for a long time. And so that's the place this is coming from. How do we bring our resources at the university and bring our resources to improve government, and in this case, advance the military mission and look at this resilience thing through that lens. So the specific goals of the Defense Community Resilience Program are to enhance the resilience of our partner communities, and that includes the installations, because that's another aspect of this, from our perspective at the Institute of Government, is to recognize that these installations are communities unto themselves. And that's not something we've done in the past. So, they have all the same infrastructure, they have a lot of the same challenges from workforce to education to water and sewer. And so how do we bring them into this fold of partners that we're helping in all these diverse ways? And then how do we turn that into sustaining the military mission? I mean, ultimately, that's what we're here. In talking about this in the national security lens is all about, is sustaining the military mission, sustaining these crucial installations, both through our national security, but then to the local economies and the local resilience. And then how do we use these opportunities as a laboratory to advance resilience planning and advance resilience practice that's applicable to communities across the board. What we're doing here, I think this investment in national security, investment in defense communities and installations is a fantastic opportunity to experiment and do things like we're doing at Parris Island, and innovate and do things differently, and then have those test cases to make the cases to other communities that this really works and this is a good way forward, and it's something that's worth investing in. Our program is really based on partnerships. If I put a list of all of our partners up there, you wouldn't be able to read it, and it'd be logos the size of pennies, but these are just a handful of our sort of programmatic DoD level partners that either just provide technical support or funding. We work a lot with the REPI office, SURPASS. If y'all familiar with the Southeast Regional Partnership for Planning and Sustainability, they're a fantastic partner that have really helped us stand up and get running. A lot of our funding and projects are supported by NIFWIF via the REPI program, or REPI program via NIFWIF. We also work a lot with the Georgia Sentinel landscape, and hopefully increasingly with the Lowcountry Sentinel landscape, as well as our partners with the Corps of Engineers, and then with the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. So the bottom line of all what I'm trying to get up to, lead up to, is that I think this DCRP is a model that can either be transplanted and replicated by partners in other areas, including this region. But at the same time, we're also directly engaged in developing and executing projects. And so we're interested in doing that around here too, if that's helpful and necessary. Or we also have a lot of programmatic agreements and partnerships and relationships that I think can help get projects off the ground and get projects funded, both with other universities and private partners and whoever else is championing these things. So I hope that you will look at us that way as just an opportunity to help leverage the resources and the activities that are already going on and help advance those. So we're working with a number of installations across the region. This work really started out of a partnership with Fort Benning about 5 or 6 years ago. We'll talk more about that project in a minute. But we actually have a number of faculty and staff on site at Fort Benning, and that's sort of the core of what we've been doing. And so a lot of what we'll talk about in terms of projects is around that. We recently sent a faculty member to be on site at Fort Stewart and are developing that kind of capacity. And then we have a bunch of one-off projects and sort of relationships with installations from North Carolina down to North Florida, doing a variety of different things and trying to build that capacity and develop those sort of local relationships and that local capacity to have a more sustained programmatic presence like we do at Fort Benning and Fort Stewart. In terms of the actual work that we do, a lot of our in-house capacity, again, is focused on that local government. So we do a lot of compatible use planning work, infrastructure planning and design, a lot of hazard mitigation and hazard response increasingly. After Helene, that's been forefront of everybody's mind. And so we're trying to respond to that need, working with Georgia Emergency Management, increasingly Alabama Emergency Management now. We do a lot of community sort of service assessments. We have a whole workforce and economic development team that can do that kind of work, and we're doing housing studies and things like that. A lot of economic impact assessments talking about how these projects fit into a larger economic and community development vision. And we also have a team of lawyers that do a lot of law and policy research, particularly focused on some of the permitting issues associated with these novel projects. But ultimately, what we really focus on is developing these multi-benefit projects. Like, how do we think about these challenges and threats to our installations and our communities and develop solutions that not only secure the military mission and serve their basic infrastructure function, but how do they contribute to the larger idea of community prosperity, social values, and environmental integrity? So how do we really conceptualize these things from a system level and focus on having that triple win for all the aspects that we're talking about in resilience? So with that, I'll stop for a second and see if there are any questions kind of about our programmatic thing before I launch into talking about a handful of projects, because it can get a little long-winded here and we'll probably run out of time. But are there any questions at the moment? Okay, so jumping in, starting with Fort Benning, like I said, that's where we got started and that's where we have the most robust engagement. So we have an intergovernmental support agreement to support work directly on site there, and then leveraging that to develop projects both on site and then in the surrounding communities. We're supporting something called the Georgia-Alabama Partnership for Sustainability. That is this regional effort around Fort Benning to be better prepared for disaster response and think about the whole region as sort of a resilience island and in the event of a natural disaster, and how we're supporting community engagement and planning around that effort. Talking about the Laundry Creek project, which is a stream realignment that is enhancing the resilience of their airfield. And then the project actually that started all this was a regional compatible use planning project that I'll talk a little bit about. So our IGSA, or Intergovernmental Support Agreement at Fort Benning, we have 2 faculty members and 7 staff members that are on site there, supporting their NEPA program with some of our law and policy research and really trying to help them be innovative and proactive in using things like categorical exclusions and nationwide permits and things in a more creative and aggressive way, maybe than they've done it before. Supporting their cultural resources program. So we've actually taken on their cultural resources staff as UGA staff members and connected them with our archaeology school and the archaeology lab at UGA, again, to help improve those practices, build more efficiency, and also give some continuity to their team. They, because of the contractual nature they had, there was a lot of turnover, a lot of disruption in their operations, and it's a great opportunity for us to leverage the educational and research mission of the university and the Franklin School with the needs to execute the cultural resource mission there in what's a really fantastically rich environment around Fort Benning. And then resilience planning support, again, that includes the regional disaster management project that I was talking about, as well as developing these specific sort of resilience projects on site there. And then we also, as an add-on, took on their rideshare program because they really didn't have anybody to do that. So we tacked that on to one of our job duties. And so the disaster project, the Georgia-Alabama Partnership for Sustainability. So we just, 2 weeks ago, hosted a regional conference to reinvigorate. This is actually a project that the GAPS has been an organization that they stood up about 7 or 8 years ago and then had kind of gotten defunct during COVID. And so we've stepped in to try to reinvigorate that and breathe some new life into it. So we kicked it off with a big conference there in Columbus, Georgia. Had about 250 attendees. Brandon Cockrell, the deputy ASA for installations and energy, was our keynote speaker, and he really highlighted this focus on identifying plans and strategies to view the installations as these resilience islands. I guess here on the coast you have actual literal islands, so it's a little less figurative, but in the middle of Georgia or in southwest Georgia, it's trying to make it a figurative island where they can be self-sustained for 14 days in the event of a disaster and that cuts them off from the outside world. So how can they supply water and power and sewer and internet and all the things that they need not only to function on site, but that all of their soldiers and employees need to function out in the larger community. So how can they work with these communities to make sure that they can operate under any scenario like that? And so, of course, that requires immense amounts of planning and partnership and collaboration and conversation. So the whole point is just to start the series of events to, one, make sure everybody knows everybody and everybody's got each other's contact information, and start that process of thinking about what do we need to have in terms of generator capacity, making sure everybody has the right hookups that you can use each other's generators, knowing where all the generators are, who's got water, who's got this, who's got that in the event of the disaster, and making sure that we're building out that plan. This is going to be a multi-year effort that we're just getting underway. But we're real excited about that partnership and think it's something that is replicable in a lot of different contexts. And then the River Valley Community Compatible Development Plan is the compatible use plan I referenced. It's really sort of kicked off this project, or this whole program. This grew out of so I guess taking a step back, Fort Benning has a really aggressive buffer program through the REPI office. They both have a lot of encroachment issues from residential development around their perimeter, particularly from Columbus and Phoenix City, but they also have a whole lot of environmental compliance issues with red-cockaded woodpeckers and gopher tortoises. So they've been working with the Nature Conservancy, Georgia Forestry Commission, Georgia DNR, and a whole host of other partners to buy up lots of land and have this protected buffer that is also a sanctuary for these other species and alleviate some of those environmental burdens. This started to be an issue for the local communities. I think their goal is to protect 75,000 acres by 2030. They've protected close to 40,000, I think now. And the communities are starting to realize, hey, this is impacting us. Like, we're seeing these impacts on our tax rolls. It's taking money away from our schools. We're not really crazy about this. So Fort Benning and the partners started to ask, well, like, what can we do about that? How can we mitigate some of these impacts and try to bolster that public support and re-engage the communities in buying into this program. So they came to the Institute of Government. We worked with the Regional Commission, worked with their REPI partners to come up with an idea of going to Old CC and developing this kind of a new vision for what a compatible use plan could be, and really focusing on that economic development vision. Instead of viewing compatible use as a regulatory response, like how do you have zoning practices and height restrictions and legal approaches to dealing with these challenges, how do we create a proactive vision of the kind of development that would be both beneficial to the communities and beneficial to the Army in respecting these natural resources? So this was a 2-year planning effort. We started back in 2021, I guess it was. We started talking about this in 2019, got disrupted by COVID, actually started in 21, finished it in 23, and have been continuing to work with the communities and implement it since then. But really focuses on a 4-part strategy of focusing on the existing downtowns. Like the counties that surround Fort Benning are all lovely historic places. Some of them have really vibrant downtowns already. Some of them have more old struggling downtowns. How do we focus on those as development centers and sources of investment, creating small businesses in the existing development footprint instead of having them be drawn into sucked into the allure of other development closer to Columbus, becoming more of a bedroom community for the urban center? And how do they develop this more concentrated rural identity, which is what they all to a person say they want anyway, is protecting that rural identity, protecting the natural resources. So how do they have that economic development vision that values that? But to do that, that requires strategic infrastructure investments. How do we work with partners to get them the funding to upgrade their water and sewer, get broadband extended to these communities, and build the basic infrastructure they need to have these vibrant downtowns and to attract new people to move to these communities and keep their young people in these communities. And then thinking about what are the compatible economic uses that can sustain these communities. Things like outdoor recreation. The city of Columbus has had tremendous success over the last couple of decades of building an outdoor recreation program based around whitewater rafting and hiking and biking and all those sort of things. But there's no effort to extend that out to the rural region. You see models that are having a lot of success with this around Asheville and Greenville, where you have an urban center that's a hub of a much larger outdoor recreation economy. So how do we work with Columbus and these rural communities to replicate that? And getting the development authorities in these communities buy into that as economic development. Not everybody's going to get the next big car plant. And even if you did, I'm not sure that's what these communities actually want. But how can they have a more locally appropriate, sustainable economic development vision that values what the Army values? And then helping them have a regional approach to that. Thinking about how they pull together, have a regional identity that looks at all the different things across the region that can be leveraged to sell this region and sell the values there. There's a ton of really great things in each of these communities, but not enough in any one to really be that great. But together they have a lot of a story to tell from cultural and heritage tourism. There's a tremendous music scene. There's a lot of folk art going on, tremendous food culture in a lot of these communities. And how do we celebrate that and elevate that in a way that these communities can value it and work to preserve it as a way of preserving the landscape that connects back to the military mission? So thinking about those dominoes and, again, creating that proactive vision for what these communities can be doing that supports the military in a somewhat indirect way. You with me there? And then in a more physical way, we also are working on site to identify projects to bolster resilience. So this is a project that we worked with the College of Engineering to execute, or at least design. But it came out of the fact that our faculty member at Fort Benning was actually in the meeting where they were talking about the area development plan for the airfield, and how there's this tremendous ditch right at the base of it that is a safety concern and a constant headache for having to get waivers from the FAA, and it was also a barrier to some conversations about potentially extending the runway. So we need to explore building a giant culvert to cover this thing up. It's like a $60 million project. It's like a mile long. You see a picture here, but it doesn't really do justice to the scale of this ditch. It's probably 30 feet deep at average and 100 plus feet wide at some point. So it's just huge. But looking at some aerial photos, looking at some historic aerial photos and stuff, you can see that the stream didn't used to be there. They had actually moved it back, 80 years ago when they were using some areas to the east there as a firing range, and it just continued to move it around as they extended the airfield. So we're like, over by that tree line, this is the historic channel for this creek. What if you just put the creek back over there instead of burying it? And so, long story short, this is now the preferred course of action that's being worked into their upgrades to the airfield. And so that's kind of an example, like how do we identify these challenges, but then really think about how we develop multiple benefits out of a project rather than just the quick and easy. I mean, not easy, certainly building a culvert was not going to be easy, but instead of the quick sort of snap judgment turn to a hard infrastructure solution, how do we think more broadly and systematically about project design? So this is just a drawing showing where the ditch currently is up here, and then relocating it to its historic channel, and then reconnecting it so it's permanently out of the way, not a new piece of infrastructure that needs to be maintained, while also generating the ecological, environmental benefits of restoring it. So similarly, we're working on a shoreline stabilization project with the Naval Station Mayport in Jacksonville. So Mayport's located at the mouth of the St. Johns River. Again, adjacent this Jacksonville, just north of Jacksonville beaches. There is a stretch of Highway A1A that is the only vehicular access both to the commercial gate for the naval station and is the only vehicular access to the community known as the Mayport Village, historic fishing community that's sort of sandwiched between the naval station and the rest of the city. And again, that's the only way anybody gets in or out, at least by car. There is a ferry that goes across the river. And this road used to be protected by a large marsh kind of beach area that was a park that was maintained by the city of Jacksonville. But over the years, that beach has washed away, that marsh has eroded, and now that the river is steadily undermining this road. And during Hurricane Irma, it actually washed out part of one of the lanes and had to be repaired, and the gate was closed for a while, and it was a big mess. Those are the pictures you can see over here. So we got funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to look at this shoreline and try to envision what sort of a multi-win project here might look like. How do we encapsulate the community values of keeping this recreation area despite its degraded state? People are still out there fishing and sunbathing. People actually drive out into the sand and will park in the water to fish out of the back of their truck. So how do we keep that recreational use and that community value and enhance it as an economic amenity for this community while also protecting this road and restoring some of the environmental benefits that it provides? So this is just a conceptual drawing. Is this? No, sorry. This is also a drawing that Kelsey Boych did, conceptualizing that idea of a project, having hard structural elements, but also with the marsh components, and then a beach area and the engagement with outdoor recreation and community values. And if you look carefully, you can even see the road back there. But again, thinking about the values that we're accentuating in the project design. I was clicking on it before because there's an animated version of this picture that I really love. The waves are moving and the birds are flying, the people are walking all around. But I put the wrong one in. Similar project we're doing at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. There is erosion, again, along the Neuse River at the end of their airfield. It is right on the edge of their property line and is beginning to cut into and expose some, they had to relocate some power lines and things already because of this, but it's an ongoing threat to their operations. And so the Corps of Engineers is actually already doing a design for an armoring, a stabilization project for the shoreline that we're supporting and trying to inform that effort. But we've then got support from NIFWIF to look at, well, what else is going on in this watershed that is causing this problem? And identifying some potential culprits and projects that we can do at that larger scale in the community to bolster the resilience of the armoring project that they're doing here, because just by the nature of the Air Force is limited to working within the footprint of their installation. But there's a lot more going on here that's driving this erosion. So how do we identify those system level drivers and try to address those in a way that is beneficial? So some of the ideas that we've identified are stormwater management. All of the stormwater from the city of Goldsboro gets channeled into this creek here and flows into the Neuse River directly upstream of this site, which is coincidentally also right where across the river from some wastewater treatment ponds. So the levee that is the airfield and these levees for the wastewater treatment pond also channelize the river right at this point where that stormwater is coming in. So understanding those dynamics and are there opportunities to maybe reconsider how those wastewater treatment plants are designed? Because coincidentally, the city is also looking to decommission those ponds because they need to upgrade their treatment capacity anyway and want to transition away from those. So how do we think about projects that could incorporate those values, and what are the other elements that need to be considered in beginning a conceptual design process for a project that will augment the existing armoring project? I feel like I described that badly. That makes sense? And then more on the community economic development side, we're working with Robins Air Force Base and the city of Warner Robins. They have somewhat similar stormwater flooding issues. Basically, all the stormwater from the city of Warner Robins over here flows across the airfield or under the airfield in a pipe right about here to there. So on a major storm event, sometimes that pipe gets clogged, it gets overwhelmed, there's flooding, it's a bad situation. So we were talking to the city about improved stormwater management, how to think more about green infrastructure, how to do more infiltration, and learned that the city was also engaged in a years-long project to create a downtown for itself. It doesn't really have a center or a hub, and it is their vision to build that. And so they've been working on that for a number of years, and that's this area in red is something called the Commercial Circle, where they've been buying land specifically to build this. They bought like 98% of the land in that red circle now, and are beginning to develop visions for what that should look like. And so we volunteered to support that effort and help them do the visualization of what this area should look like, recognizing that stormwater infiltration and stormwater management needs to be a critical element for that, and using that then as a template for stormwater management across the city. So this was a conceptual design that we did just of the building layouts. We did more, renderings and lots of other stuff, but this shows just how we help them visualize what development in that area could look like to achieve their economic development vision, to achieve their community development goals, but also building in a lot of green space, incorporating stormwater management into their streetscapes, incorporating a very large stormwater park that would be kind of a huge element of the social interactions with this space and building that in. And then now working with Georgia Emergency Management to help them get some disaster mitigation funds to help them realize their economic development vision by incorporating these disaster resilience elements. And I think that's a big part of what we try to do is also bring these additional resources that maybe communities aren't always thinking about because they're not building these nature-based elements into their projects. They see it as a streetscape project. They see it as an economic development project. But if you reframe it and you build in these elements, that suddenly opens up additional resources and additional ways to approach executing a project. And then lastly, I think I'll talk a little bit about our Fort Stewart Regional Resilience Study. This is another OLCC funded project that we're doing with Fort Stewart. Again, going there and talking to them, we expected a similar conversation like we had with Fort Benning, but their major concern when we talked to them was transportation and housing and to a lesser extent, well, those two things, flooding, the transportation network, and then availability of housing. So we put together this project to address those needs. So what we're doing is doing some really robust modeling, localized modeling of flooding, and specifically of its impacts to their transportation network, and then doing a network analysis to understand how that actually impacts their operations and their accessibility to different parts of the community. So if people live in, say, Bullitt County off to the west, and there's a major flood, what routes are not going to be available to them to get to the front gate? How much longer is that going to extend their trip time or make them completely inaccessible for some period of time, and just thinking through what that does to operations, particularly, in critical infrastructure besides just housing and the workforce folks, but, they have a real need to be able to access Hunter Army Airfield, which is in downtown Savannah, and the Georgia port. So understanding connectivity between all those under different disaster and flooding scenarios. And then also understanding where that workforce is and thinking about how not only how those flooding impacts impact where those people are located and how that accessibility could be impacted under different flooding scenarios, but also the availability of housing and how that's likely to change over time as Savannah continues to grow. It's much like around here, it's just booming. There's construction everywhere and housing costs are astronomical. And it's a big concern for both the personnel, the enlisted personnel and the civilian personnel who work at Fort Stewart. So trying to help develop some more additional data and resources to help them get a handle on that. And at the same time, then looking at the natural infrastructure landscape of this region. So how do the conservation goals of the Army and the conservation goals of other partners across the region, how are those opportunities to ameliorate at least some of those flooding impacts? Like how can land conservation, marsh restoration and wetland preservation help reduce some of the flooding impacts and identify opportunities for additional investment that can ameliorate some of the vulnerabilities that our flooding study will reveal. So, yeah, that's just reiterating some of the points there. So, with that, I think I'll wrap it up and ask if there are any questions about any of those projects. Nope. All right.
Okay,
Well,
thank
good.
you.
Thank you for your attention, and thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks, Scott. Oh, this is fancy.
Yeah,
How does
it's,
this work? Oh, I see.
I've never seen a weapon.
I know, right? Yes. All right, well, next up, we're gonna have Jason with McCormick Taylor share the Sand River Stormwater Project, so. Thank you, I know we're running a little behind, don't feel rushed, you're good.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to slip over the wires, probably sitting between everyone and a beer or something other than this. So I got the lucky spot to tie you all up today. So it's great to see a huge crowd today for the first conference, 130 folks, I think. So that's really awesome. So my name is Jason Hedrick with McCormick Taylor. Today we'll be talking about our City of Aiken project and kind of how we can, while this is not really a coastal type project, but how this can parlay into any community's resilience plans, whether it be coastal or upstate. And then also how do we use some new technology that might be new to some folks or pretty common to others, continuous monitored adaptive control system. So this is kind of a year, well, at this point it's been operational for 2 years, so it's kind of like let's see how the system's performed over the past 2 years and against what we thought it would be doing. So just a little bit of background for those that are not familiar with this project. City of Aiken is outside on the South Carolina side of the Savannah River, across from Augusta, in the Sandhills region of South Carolina. This project particularly had to deal with the runoff of downtown Aiken. It's about 1,200 acres, 29% impervious, a lot of impervious area. The downside of all that was the 1,200 acres drained through one centralized point, I guess that was about a 10-foot CMP pipe into the Hitchcock Woods and the Sand River. The Sand River began at the terminus of this pipe, which over the last 50 years the pipe's been consistently extended further and further into the woods. This was last done in the 90s, in which there was an erosion issue, and they've added some lovely gabion baskets, great engineering approach. The problem is when the gabion baskets ended, the erosion just kept on going, and these pictures were taken in 2018, 2017. As you can see here, some 30 to 40 foot incisions. The channel is actively eroding at this time, every time it rained, whether it be small half-inch rain event all the way up to a thunderstorm. You go out the next day and it had dropped noticeable amount. And every time the sand dropped, the walls would either widen or cave in, like the far picture on the right there. Picture on the right actually was in an area that was starting to threaten a historic stable of the Hitchcock generation. To those that don't know what Hitchcock Woods is, it's a privately owned yet open to the public equestrian, hiking, walking environment. It was privately owned through the DuPonts and the Hitchcock family up until the early 1900s, the mid 1900s, in which it was then a foundation formed. And like I said, it's really renowned for horseback riding, but it's also home to a lot of sensitive endangered species, the red cockaded woodpecker, gopher tortoise. There are a lot of pre-Native American artifacts within the woods, like historic man, as well as a lot of some threatened and unique vegetation. The problem was this erosion is just picking the sand up and moving it and depositing it into the delicate, sensitive wooded wetlands further downstream, as well as just creating instability in the woods itself and a safety hazard. So this 1,200 acres was basically comprised of two main watersheds. There's the area, this area here, which is the downtown area, and then this area here, which is more of the residential area to the east. They all combine to the one pipe going into the woods at this location. We looked at multiple ways of modeling and how to approach this project. We could have gotten very in-depth into the modeling using some complex things. At the end of the day, we chose as the goal was to try to get something in the ground sooner than later, was just to utilize good old-fashioned TR20 and treated this project as if we were developing Aiken today, going from a woods in good condition, pine forest, to the 1,200 acres of built-out urban environment. We ran a pre and post hydrology for that, and you can see we're currently today, there's about 1,000 CFS for the 10-year storm, and about woods good condition, just under 500 CFS. So the discharge through this watershed doubled as Aiken was built out over the last 100 plus years. Prior to the 50s, this channel was something that you could just hop across. It was a very pristine woodland creek. What happened in the 50s was the Savannah River nuclear site started to grow, so did Aiken. A lot of roads were paved, storm troops put in, and that runoff was accelerated quicker into the woods. One thing that we wanted to touch on is, with a sand-based channel, is it doesn't take much to move that channel. Your normal water quality rain event caused erosion. So when we were looking at what sort of storm event we wanted to try to manage, ideally we'd manage all of them, but money, time, and the will of the people or the public wasn't there to do that. So we had to pick something that was economically affordable and something that we could get in the ground, which ended up being the 10-year storm event. So we went ahead and did a watershed plan, as we always do, and identified about 20 locations that could manage this watershed back to a 10-year storm event. This was pre-COVID pricing at $25 million. I would say today it's probably $50 to $75 million, just the way things are going. And this combined 20 projects would store the 58 acre feet that we would need to manage the watershed back to woods good condition. We started talking internally with the town and the Hitchcock Woods Foundation, which were a valuable partner in this project. And we kind of didn't do the easy way. The easy way would have been going around and picking the easiest sites within the town that were smaller, a little bit more manageable, but that really didn't move the needle. We would need to have done 10 to 12 of those projects before we could actually see a noticeable solution or reduction in flow into the Sand River. So we decided to jump off the deep end and go straight in with BMP 6 and 6A, which is end of the pipe treatment system. 6 and 6A are underground stormwater vaults. These properties were co-jointly owned by the Woods Foundation and the city, and there was a desire from the Woods Foundation to not have an open stormwater management system pond at their main entryway into the Hitchcock Woods. We all know stormwater ponds quickly become forgotten about, and they become overgrown, and they become full of invasives and nasty things and trash and debris. And the woods didn't really want that as their entryway. the town or the city and the mayor, who was a huge proponent of this project, realized this was a great opportunity to do a park. And with doing a park, we can do underground management. Drove the price up for sure, but the city got a park out of it. The Hitchcock Woods got a grand entryway, and we got 25 acre feet of underground stormwater management. The uniqueness of this site is, as you will see shortly, is the elevation change between this site and this site is quite severe. It's also nestled into 2 ravines, which would require significant grading to do an above ground site as well. The general flow path here is flow comes in from the 2 storm drain systems through 6, and then flows down to 6A, and then out into Sand River. And this is where the Opti CMAX system really comes into play here. When we were looking at this system pre-considering Opti in the CMAX system was we had 2 options we could choose from. We could design the storm trap, underground storm trap detention systems as either 100% infiltration, which means we would have 25 acre feet of capture and an overflow weir that any storm that exceeded that 25 acre feet would just spill out and leave and go down to the creek. Or we could design it as a detention facility with a low flow orifice, a rather large one, in which we would provide detention management, but we wouldn't really get infiltration in of that. We wouldn't be able to infiltrate that 25 acre feet of storage. We would be just managing it and putting that volume out into the creek, which, as you know, with low velocity, continuous duration discharge would still cause erosion within that sand channel. So that's when we paired up with Opti, who happens to be in the room today. Wave. Didn't know he was going to be here today until we ran into each other. And working with Opti, we were able to develop a system that does both. Small storm events, we were able to infiltrate 100% of that 25 acre foot. Larger storm events, we can turn the facility into a detention facility and manage the flow through a 36-inch orifice, sliding gate orifice. And in between the two, we can have both. We can adjust that sliding gate based off the storm event that we're getting. So quick duration storms, the system's smart enough to know what to set that weir gate at and whatnot. So it takes a relatively dumb system and creates it to be a smart system, smart stormwater management. And I can go on and on about Opti and whatnot, but basically it monitors the weather, and every couple minutes it looks at the forecast and goes, all right, no rain, no rain, no rain. Oh, rain's coming. How much is it going to rain? Takes the amount of projected precipitation for the watershed and then calculates the runoff volume. And then it takes that volume and looks at what's inside our vaults currently infiltrating. If it's just rained, our vaults are full. So it's going to say, oh, we're going to need 18 acre feet for this next rain event. It'll draw down the vaults until there's 18 acre feet available through the 36-inch slide gates. If it only needs 5 acre feet, it's only going to draw down 5 acre feet and leave the rest sitting in the vault so they can keep infiltrating in. If we need 30 acre feet, then all the doors open up and the thing drains out. So it allows us to really maximize the amount of infiltration we're getting over any rain event, and whether it's back-to-back events or spread out. And this right here is just the little diagram of the 36-inch slide gate that's fully automated, and it's at both outfalls. Really makes a nice access point into the vaults as well. So this is the elevation change we're talking about here, which made this a little bit complicated when it came to the Opti optimization, is because we have to treat this almost like a stormwater system or a sanitary sewer system, in which BMP 6 has its own operating Opti system and BMP 6A has its own operating system, and they talk to each other. And if 6A has room, 6 will leave its gate open and continuously fill up 6A. And once 6A is full, it'll tell 6 to shut its gate, and it will continue to store runoff in 6. So they're consistently talking to each other. It did add to the cost of the project because we had to have 2 Opti systems and not just one, like you would normally have if you just had one gigantic vault system. Down here is just a picture of the installation. As you can see, we had about a 50-foot excavation cut into the hull here with a temporary shoring wall, just to make 6A nest into this slope. This is where we handed everything over to Opti, and they went through and did their optimization and their modeling, and we just basically said, this is what we have, and this is what we want, and they made it happen. Very seamless. So we had basically several behaviors set up that helped simplify the explanation of this, and that small storm events that would only fill, say, 6A or 6, will pass directly through 6 and then fill in 6A here with this orange line here. We don't have any overflow. We don't have any bypass out of the system, 100% capture. Medium storms, and by medium storms, probably a 2-year to a 5-year storm in this case, 2 to 5 year storm is a medium storm. We will capture 100% of that between both of the vaults. 6A will fill up and then 6 will fill up. And then anything over about a 5-year storm, again, this is also based off of intensity. Aiken has a very unique hydrology. You can have the same storm event happen twice and have 2 different runoff amounts just because of Aiken's sand and clay and pipe system. But these larger storms will get captured in both vaults and then overflow out into the creek. So those are 3 basic scenarios. The model was showing that if we went with traditional non-opti system, we could capture about 26% of what we wanted to. It's not really great. You're gonna spend $8 million, $9 million and only get a quarter of what you want out of it. With the opti system, we're capturing 71% to 66% of that 10-year management storm event. So all of a sudden, we're taking a system that we're spending $10 million on and only managing maybe the 1 and 2 year event, and we're able to manage almost 71% of every 10-year event for a little bit more, a couple $100,000 more. So 9 million plus 300,000, and we've gotten almost all the way there to our 10-year management goal. So let's quickly go through some installation pictures. Cost-wise, this cost was exaggerated, or I guess more higher than it really needed to be because we wanted to put a park on top of it. If we were just going to do grass meadow on top, we would have been in and out for about $10 million for the 25 acre foot of vaults, the opti system, and then all of the temporary shoring walls were about $1 million right there to protect the site. So added in the park, the roadway rehabilitation in the area, and then some pipelining, we were up to $15 million as we were going into the COVID environment. If we would have waited another year, it probably would have been 20 million to 25 million. So we got incredibly lucky with when we advertised this. The other challenging part was this is right in historic downtown Aiken. We had no staging room. Historic streets that the tractor trailers had to operate on to deliver these storm trap vaults. The storm trap vaults came in 2 sections. They're a 15-foot internal height once they're assembled. So you had 2 7.5-foot tall to 8-foot tall structures sitting on top of a tractor trailer bed. Because of the amount of fill we have on these, 1 piece per tractor trailer was usually the limit. So we had about 1,300 tractor trailer deliveries over the course of 3 to 4 months through downtown historic Aiken. We would stage things over top where 6 would eventually be built, and they would carry 1 by 1 down into the hole for 6A using a lovely homemade buggy they made with a bulldozer and some welding skills. This kind of gives you the scale for BMP6, which is the larger of the BMPs. That's about 17 acre feet there. That's a full-size tractor trailer parked in the hole with the crane. At the end of the day, this is the opti system. It's very, you wouldn't know it's there. It's all housed within the control pieces or within this manhole, and then a very small control panel. It is hardwired. You could have done solar. The city preferred hardwired just for the reliability of it. The one thing we did find was this area was prone for lightning strikes, and within the first month, we blew the entire control system out by an adjacent lightning strike, even though we did have a surge protector on everything. This was the finished park product. As you can see here, we included a horse-friendly pathway to go from where the people parked their trailers down into the woods, pervious rubber sidewalks for infiltration, and really great to walk on, and then a lot of educational signage. So. Now we're going to get on into how the first year of operation for this facility went. And there was, as with any sort of bringing something online with this many components, there was some bugs to work out and some things, including the lightning strike that cut things offline for a while, and then just getting everything calibrated. This system continuously learns, or Opti will go through the data every once in a while and continuously adapts to it so that the system can operate at its peak performance. What we found originally was 6 and 6A were not communicating that well together. By the time 6A would say, I'm full, shut the door, it was too late and we had overflow happening. So trying to fine tune those things made a big difference. But you can see here, there's a lot of rain events we had, which was helpful. And this slide here, there's a lot of data here. I'll probably just skip through it because it is 4:30 in the afternoon and you've all stared at these screens for the entire day. I got some better graphs coming up pretty soon. So So here's our kind of our infiltration versus outflow per storm event. For the events from June 3rd, 2023 to May 2024, we captured and infiltrated 85% of every rainfall that happened in the watershed, which is huge. It was just about 28 million cubic feet of volume. One of the things that are interested here is you could tell the estimated rainfall always far out-estimated what actually fell within the watershed. About 23.73 inches were forecasted over that year, and only about 18 inches were actually recorded on site. This is one particular storm event. This is probably what we would say is a medium storm event. Again, we captured, it's a 3.2 inch event was forecasted, about 2.34 inches fell. We were able to capture 88% of that runoff and infiltrate it. Much smaller event here, which is probably your everyday rainy event, we were able to capture 100%, which is great. An event like that would have caused erosion in the Sand River. So the intent of the project was to try to just, we weren't going to stop the erosion, but was to minimize the frequency and the duration of erosion-related events. Again, everything under a 2-inch event was really our sweet spot. We were able to capture about 100% of each one of those rainfalls. So here's someone, we started looking at some weird things going on. Infiltration versus outflow, back-to-back storms. So you can see here, we had plenty of storage. Why did it trigger a bypass event? Well, we lost power. That's the problem. When you have Helene come through, we lost power for a while. The system does not have a battery backup capable of controlling the 36-inch slide gate. It would be quite costly, I don't want to say cost effective. And for the scheme of things, the city was like, it's okay if this doesn't work all the time. You know, we're looking at over the course of the year, we wanted to work most of the time, but the cost of installing a battery backup to control two 36-inch slide gates was just not worth the cost. So during a power failure event, both gates just open up and the system operates as a detention facility, which is still better than nothing. Most of the time, power comes back on the next day. Helene, it was off for quite a while. So you can see here for the performance for Hurricane Helene before it lost power. This location got 6.5 inches of rain over the duration of the storm, with an average rainfall intensity about 1/2 inch per hour, so not too bad. You can see here we lost all the data. So this would have been a great storm to model, and we didn't have anything. But the power came back on. As you can see, the systems were still retaining water and feeding that out, which is great. Going back to some normal storms that happened over the past year, you can see that the dashboard here, and hopefully if we have time, I'll bring it up if this laptop has, I'm pointing my laser at the laptop like y'all can see it. This is really a long day. You can see here, this is the gate positions. We can monitor from the dashboard online to see if the gates are closed or open and what triggers them to be opened. You can see this rain event, which was about a little over an inch. The system worked as intended. And here's I guess to me, the more useful part of the dashboard is you can monitor the water level on both systems. And you can see the rain hit. There's a little bit of a peak in 6 as it's pushing the water into 6A, and 6A captures that entire amount. And then this curve here is your infiltration curve. Something happened here that the gate kicked open for a minute. One of the things we did find was people like to play with it remotely and in person, and also people like to come down and look inside of it. That was either related to the town or other maintenance people. So we had a lot of people, like, I'd be getting notifications that the gate was opening, and I'm like, why is it opening? It's sunny, it shouldn't be. So I'd call, and they're like, oh, they want to go down and look at it. Okay, that's great. You just let all the water out that we're trying to infiltrate. Again, you can see here difference between volume levels. Again, the 1-inch storm is really, you can see how kind of reactive here the gates are with opening and closing. It's constantly feeding 6A. As 6A has more room, as you can see in this thing here, 6A fills up, it shuts the gate and 6 starts to fill up, and then it infiltrates, and then it fills up and infiltrates. So it's a very, very dynamic and reactive system. It's very quick. Jump ahead a couple of these, because a lot of this becomes repetitive. When you're putting these slides together, you're like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And then you're standing up here and it's like, that's the same thing over and over again. It's also 4:30 and you're all thirsty. This is a really cool graphic of a larger storm event. As you can see here, how 6 and 6A both fill up, but as 6A infiltrates, 6A had great infiltration. It was sitting on a bed of pure beach sand 40 feet in the ground. So it would suck the water in as quick as we could get the water. BMP6, because it sat at a higher elevation, sat on a layer of kale and clay, which was pretty much concrete. To get some infiltration in 6, what we ended up doing was drilling 36-inch chimneys throughout the footprint of the BMP and then backfilling them with stone. What we didn't realize was, even though we were not connected to groundwater by doing that, we still had about 40 feet of separation between the bottom of the chimney and where groundwater started. EPA considers that as groundwater injection. So we had to go get a groundwater injection permit, even though we were not putting it in the groundwater. If we would have dug a 36-inch wide by 100-foot long trench, we wouldn't have to do that because of red tape and bureaucracy in the EPA. So as long as your diameter is smaller than the width or the length of the chimney, it's a groundwater injection. But if your length of your facility is longer than the depth of your gravel chimney, then it's not. Make that make sense. So that's where we get that quick infiltration on BMP 6A and a more extended duration on 6. So again, here you can see where again, this is the system learning. It's letting 6A overfill. And we didn't want that. So we got with the Opti folks after this event and it's like, hey, can you tweak this so that 6A triggers an overfill event before it actually overfills? And it was a quick 5-minute conversation. They tweaked the system and then it worked. So, and then here we go. The next storm event, you can see, big storm event, that 6A is no longer, it's filling but not overflowing. So this is kind of the cool stuff, the infiltration rates. Kind of all over the place, which is kind of unique. But generally speaking, 6A had about 2 to 3 inches per hour of infiltration, where 6, again, on that kale and clay with the stone chimneys, we're looking about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of infiltration per hour. Again, over a 17-acre-foot facility and a 7-acre-foot facility, that still takes a long time to do water through infiltration. And this is kind of the cool stuff. When we started doing the maintenance and the bi-monthly inspections, we really didn't know how much sediment we could expect coming into this system. It's 30% impervious watershed. You would think it would be minimal, but there is a lot of trees in Aiken, a lot of magnolias in Aiken. There's also, in the eastern side of town, a lot of horse farms and residential lots with poor grass coverage, so you got a lot of exposed soils. So we were kind of afraid it would get filled up really quick, but we really didn't know an idea. We pulled wet weather samples from time to time and tried to get the sediment out of it, and it was all over the place, depending on whether the city had just cleaned their streets, hadn't cleaned their streets. Couldn't really get a good baseline, so I said, well, time will tell. So it's been in operation there for 3 to 4 years, and they've been doing bi-monthly inspections and only removing about 80 cubic yards of sediment per year, which is not that bad. It's only like 8 to 10 dump truck loads. The pain in the ass is that it's 40 feet below ground and you got to vacuum it up. So no alligators in there yet. We did see a snake the one time I was in there moving around, and a couple of raccoons. So this was the website I was going to try to bring up. Oops. Okay. My screen is not that screen, so maybe I have to get out of my PowerPoint. You know how to do that? Oh.
Oh. You have that?
Yeah.
Okay.
sure I signed in again. All right, well, we may not go on the live thing, because let me just try it this way. Nope. See, on my laptop at home or at work, my password is auto-entered, and I don't have to remember it. So. Try it one more time. Before I get locked out. All right, well, I have it on my laptop in my bag, so if anyone's interested in seeing the dashboard afterwards, I can bring it up on that. Oh, or, see, I told him he'd be handy. So we'll just go back to the PowerPoint. Do you know how to get back to? So the takeaway is, after being operational for about 2 years, the first 6 months was pretty hit or miss, I'll be honest. As we're calibrating the unit, we had some of the lightning strike issues that happened consecutively. We get one cell board fixed and it would blow up again. But since,
How did you fix that?
so put in a new cell. So it's funny, the only thing that would blow up was the cellular connection that was really needed, though, to communicate from the cloud to the unit. So the unit became dead for the most part. So first time we just replaced the cellular connection, cellular cell board, and it was like, oh, we'll just hope this was a one-time thing. And not a month later, it happened again, and another tree next door blew up. So we went and did an upgraded surge protector on the electrical system for the entire park. The next thing we were going to do, if that didn't work, was to put in a very, very expensive lightning ground system on the storm trap system itself, which I think at that point the city would have been just like, we'll just send someone out there and just hand crank from that point on. That would have been incredibly expensive, but knock on wood, it's been almost 2 years since that last occurrence, and that system did seem to work. So you have to imagine we have a vault full of water sitting in the ground that has a lightning strike nearby. It is going to be a gigantic attraction of current. So that's that. Construction issues was, again, when you get low bid contractors, you usually sweat for a while because you don't know what you're going to get. And Thale Construction out of Hillsborough, North Carolina was the winning bidder, and we're like, we've never heard of this company before. Oh, great. And we did a quick Google search and found out that they just do like mega projects for the Army Corps and military bases and like really cool dam things. And they're doing a restoration of the Everglades currently. And they just happen to have a crew nearby that was unavailable for about 6 to 8 months. And they said, oh, we'll just bid on this and we get it, and we keep our guys busy. And they got it, and an amazing contractor. One of the other cool things that we did was, if you're interested in railroads, you would know Aiken is the home of the first inclined plane railroad system in the United States. The trains back in the day, the reason why Aiken's here today is because it was a train stop. And the main reason it was there was the trains back in the early 1800s did not have enough power to come up out of the Savannah Valley and up and over the Sandhills and head up into the Midlands, I guess upstate of South Carolina. So they had to stop at the downhill side of Aiken and wait for a train to come the other direction, and they hooked the two of them up, and then through use of a steam engine for assisting in braking and pulling, the one would go down and pull the other one up. That was about 300 to 400 feet from our site. So one of the cool things with the city of Aiken was they used their hospitality funds halfway through our project and said, hey, let's build a almost full-size scale model of this inclined plane, which is that picture right there. This would be the machine house and then the two tracks that go up and down. So I'll just play this one last video and then any questions, and I will get out of y'all's hair. This is a time-lapse video if it works. See, there we go. All right. Questions? Y'all want to go home? Okay.
Have y'all done any assessment of what it's done to erosion downstream? And as a follow-up, did they do any stabilization?
Good question. So that peaked, one thing in my mind that I'll hit on real quick is we also put in groundwater monitoring wells to monitor the effects that the infiltration has on the local water table. One for level, groundwater level, and then also on if the stormwater pollutants are making their way through the soil and into the groundwater and contaminating groundwater. What we found was, one, the stormwater runoff of Aiken is downright scary. I wouldn't even want to touch it with my bare hands. It's really, really bad. There's pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, copper, xylene. Like, it's ridiculous. Don't know why. The groundwater was just as bad already prior to we got started. So thankfully no one was drinking it. But what we found is we've been putting all this water in the ground, but the groundwater hasn't come up any. So as quick as we can put it in, it's just going probably right at the Sand River, about a half mile down the stream. So in some sense that's good. We're infiltrating everything, we're treating it. The groundwater's not gotten any worse. It's stayed the same. We're slowing that water and we're allowing it into the Sand River as Mother Nature wanted it to, is through groundwater daylighting. The channel itself, we did put some ground stakes in to keep an eye on it. It has slowed down significantly, the erosion. Talking to the manager of the forest of the woods, he says, there when you go down there, he's like, there's no change. Like, he said, there's probably still a much slower degradation. One example they had is during one of the erosions, they've exposed a relic of one of the original railroad tracks that fell into the channel years ago, or were dumped into the channel years ago and had been buried. And that erosion around that relic has pretty much stopped, so it's been sustained quite well. As far as restoring the channel or stabilizing it, I think the overall consensus was let's see what this system does and kind of monitor it to see, one, how quick the channel continues to erode or slows down eroding. And there's no easy way to restore the channel without a lot of money and some significant impacts to the woods itself. So the channel is trying to find its natural path at this point and level itself out. So there'd be some significant grading to lay back the slopes, which would impact gopher tortoises, woodpeckers. Because the storm drain pipe had been continuously extended into the woods up through the 90s, it's at a level there where you can't really bring that stream back up to where it was been or could have been pre-erosion. So it's definitely something that is, I think the Hitchcock Woods Foundation wants to pursue, but it's a money and timing and kind of see what's going on sort of thing. So.
Great project, Jason. Making a thing down there looks fantastic.
Thank you.
My question about the Opti system, and maybe Matt, maybe respond to this. Hey, Matt, how you doing? The predictability of the rain forecast.
Yeah.
How has that been? And I'm sure it went through a year or two of tweaking it, gauging it, but as far as it being able to predict the accuracy of rain that's going into the system.
From my observation, and I'll be honest, I haven't quite given it the love for the last couple of months that I should have been given in watching every time it rained, is that it would over predict. South Carolina, one thing I've noticed living in South Carolina for 9 years is forecasts say, oh, it's going to rain today. And you look at your radar, it's raining the next town over, or the next town. So it seemed to be pretty, your system fronts, your cold fronts or your warm fronts coming through with a consistent line of rain, the system seemed to predict very accurately. Again, it's relying on NOAA for the prediction, so it's only as accurate as NOAA's going to be. Where it seems to be over predicting is our typical summer rain pattern where you get pop-up showers and one side of Aiken will get 6 inches of rain and Hitchcock Woods got 0 and stuff like that. So I think it's been over-predicting, which is, I guess in some sense better than under-predicting because we do have the volume there for whatever does make it into the system. And I don't know.
That's important because if you've got a nice aesthetic design, you don't want to under-predict or whatever, because you would lower that pond. And if the rain doesn't fill that pond back up, then you've got a problem with the residents around there.
Exactly, yeah, that was one of the things I was thinking last night. I was like, how to tie this project into like Lowcountry projects. And, you know, the direct correlation is when you have communities with very large amenity ponds, either for aesthetics or the builder needed that dirt to build up their sites, is, well, we can pre-storm draw that pond down temporarily to store more water, but you know, over the duration of the year, the neighbors, you know, the residents don't see that, you know, exposed dirt line. But if the rain doesn't show up,
Right.
you're gonna have a dirt line until the next time it rains, so.
Matt, has there been any success from bankruptcy?
Yeah, to both those points, I think, first off, in general, I know pop-up storms are one thing, but for a system like this, the large drawdowns are normally occurring prior to larger rainfall events, which should be more predictable. The other side of that coin, I think, is a general theme of this presentation, is that with the smart infrastructure here compared to traditional infrastructure, stormwater is not an exact science. Our jobs would be very easy if it was. So through that 4-month period, we normally call an optimization period, where we witness some storms, we see how the system's interacting with these storms, then we can determine if the system needs to draw down more aggressively or less aggressively. So yeah, versus traditional infrastructure where you kind of get what you get, with this system, we can analyze how it responds and make those adjustments after.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that you could build into is like our drawdown starts 3 days out. But if you're concerned about, so that we can have a gradual drawdown and we're not, as guys, you know, causing erosion downstream, but if you're concerned about, you know, the potential for nothing to show up, you could do a much more quicker drawdown the day of or the night before sort of thing. But you're still running the risk. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a gamble, so.
The final thing I'll put in there is if there's reason for seasonality changes within the software, that can happen. So for example, in the summer, if you would want a normal pool in a wet pond to be 6 inches lower, that could be a control behavior that's adaptable.
Are you guys doing more projects?
I would love to do another one of these projects. Most of our projects lately have not utilized Opti. They've been with much more rural, smaller towns that, you know, there is a reoccurring cost with the system. But like I said, this would have been, you know, today we would be looking at spending $50 to $60 million to implement everything to get the performance that we're getting out of this system at, you know, the annual occurrences, the registration fees, I don't know off the top of my head, but, you know, well under that mega $1 million mark. So we're all constantly working with Opti to find other solutions or opportunities. That it?
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
I know everyone is ready to probably go decompress and grab your beverage of choice. Just want to say a quick thank you for being here. Thank you to our sponsors, HDR, Weston and Sampson, Davis and Floyd, ICE, KCI, SDR, and Seaman Whiteside. And thank you to our small but mighty organizing committee that put this together, several of whom are in the room. We weren't really sure where this was going to go when it began, and then Dr. Mulliken agreed to come speak, and so the pressure was on to make sure he wasn't talking to an empty room, and so we've been blown away by the level of interest and support. So thank you for all playing a role in this, and hopefully we'll do it again next year. This was the guinea pig. So just want to say thank you, and did you want to
Yeah,
give them
just
a little CE Club?
real quick, the CE Club's having a happy hour sponsored by Jay Bragg at Southern Barrel Brewery, which is right off that Walter. Y'all are more than welcome to attend. We do have a little bit of club business to take care of, but please join us if you're able. And us immediately following whenever we leave.
As soon as you can drive there.